salvaging the eyes from a basilisk, the hardened scales of a dragon, or the venomous fangs from a huge spider is something that your players may frequently ask for in a 5e campaign. But unfortunately, salvaging monster parts is not mechanically well supported by the base 5e rules. This leaves it up to GMs to improvise a solution when players ask if they can carve out the werewolf's heart. And what does a werewolf's heart do once it's been salvaged? My name is Byrne, and this is how to use monster salvage in your fantasy RPG campaign. Salvage from monsters can often have practical uses or even magical properties. Can the feather of a Pegasus be used instead of diamonds for the components of a revivify spell? Can a soup be brewed from the brain of a mind flayer to enhance a character's intellect? Part of the core fantasy of playing a professional monster hunter is being able to craft the tools of your trade from the remains of your prey. If you have a copy of Grim Hollow, the Monster Grimoire, a large amount of the work for creating monster salvage is lifted off you as the GM. Every one of the over 400 monsters in that book has salvage associated with it. But if you're like me, one book of monsters is simply not enough, and you probably use 4 or 5 different monster book supplements. So what if you want your players to be able to take salvage from a monster not in the Monster Grimoire? Designing monster salvage is really fun and can add an extra dimension to your campaign. Think to yourself what part of the monster is likely to yield useful or special properties. Is the salvage inherently or instantly usable? Or does it need to be crafted into something else, like forging dragon scales into armor? Another benefit of the monster salvage rules is that they also introduce crafting mechanics for anything from a simple potion right up to a legendary artifact. From the Monster Grimoire, there are 4 elements to take into account when crafting an item from salvage. The first is the crafting time. How long does it take to forge dragon scale mail as opposed to mind flayer soup? What tool or skill proficiencies will be needed in crafting the item? Likely smith's tools for the scale mail, or perhaps cook's utensils to cook up the mind flayer soup. Some magic items may require spells to be cast upon them during the crafting process, such as Lesser Restoration cast on an amulet of poison immunity to imbue the item with magic. What is the gold cost of the extra components required to craft the item? Leathers and buckles for the armor, or special and expensive herbs for the soup? Finally, an ability check with a set DC may be needed, such as a strength check to heat and shape the dragon scales, or an intelligence check to follow the brain soup recipe. By design, some items crafted from the Monster Grimoire require multiple different proficiencies and checks to be made during the crafting, but these don't all need to be made by the same character, encouraging your players to make things together or bring in the help of an expert NPC. You don't have to create monster salvage for every part of the monster. Usually just one key recoverable piece of salvage is enough, like the monster's heart, its pelt, its fangs, or some gland or unique appendage. You also don't have to provide powerful or specific salvage for every single monster in your campaign. Maybe you focus on only a few encounters with particular foes that you expect your players to want to salvage from. Humanoid bandits or bugbears may simply carry mundane loot on them without it being necessary to be able to carve miraculous magic items from the bugbear's bones. Some monster salvage may provide quick and immediate temporary buffs, or even be non-magical in nature entirely. Try to think of how the salvage suits the theme of your monster, but also try not to be obvious every time. For example, a Nothic's Eye could be used to create an amulet that casts Zone of Truth, but equally, the waxy skin of a doppelganger could be used to craft a candle of magicalness. Don't feel like you need to create salvage that is fully planned out for every session that you run. Your party might have just defeated a Grell and you've decided that they can harvest the tentacles, but you don't have to know exactly how the tentacles can be used right there and then. It's also fine to have room for yourself to improvise or allow your players to get creative. Maybe you thought the Grell tentacles could be milked to create a paralytic blade poison, but one of the players wants to know if they could craft a venomous whip. Again, you could design rules for the whip and how it can be crafted between sessions. You don't have to know there and then. And of course, you also don't need to design magic items entirely yourself. Maybe you take the rules from a dagger of venom and make it a whip instead. Or the bones of a wight could be whittled into the pipes of haunting. Let me show you some examples of monster salvage that I've designed for creatures from the monster manual. PDF included for them in the link down below. If you want to see more actual game content like this from these videos, actual PDFs, drop a comment down below to let me know. Starting simple with ogre salvage, where the monster manual describes ogres as greedy collectors who hoard treasure from their victims. This is an example of a time where simple loot and treasure could be lifted from the ogre's corpse as salvage instead of a specific body part. I learned that ancient bowstrings could be made from an animal sinew, so I thought maybe an ogre's sinew could be particularly tough and create especially powerful bows. Harvesting an ogre's sinew requires a sleight of hand check with someone who's proficient in survival. From there, a character proficient with leatherworker's tools can craft a longbow or shortbow using the sinew as the string. This could all be one character or multiple characters and NPCs all working together. The rogue cuts carefully where the druid instructs them when harvesting the sinew, which is then taken to the village Fletcher for construction. A bow strung with ogre sinew gains the strong draw property, which is an advanced weapon property from the Grimhollow Player's Guide. You need a minimum strength score of 13 just to have enough strength to draw an ogre strung bow, but the bow does bonus damage equal to 1 plus half your strength modifier in addition to your dexterity modifier being added to the damage. This makes ogre strung bows favored weapons for fighters and athletic rangers. Dust from a gargoyle's brittle heart can be crafted into a poison that petrifies whoever is unlucky enough to drink it. It is a particularly terrible fate for those whose assassination is also meant to send a message. There was also the idea for gargoyles' hearts to be a gem that could animate other statues, but the brittle, dusty heart fit better thematically with the cruel-minded creatures themselves. Ingestion poisons also force your players to engage creatively with the game, either needing to sneak into a kitchen or distract an evil noble to slip poison into their soup. I had a lot of fun creating ooze pies, which are basically breakable pots of acidic goo harvested from defeated oozes, which you can then throw at enemies. They aren't dissimilar as weapons to green ooze jars from the Dungeon Master's Guide, but more fun because your players get to scrape up the acidic goo and make the horrid little weapons themselves. The damage and extra effect of an ooze pie attack are based on the harvested ooze. The gelatinous cube pie goops up your opponents and slows them down, which is kind of a horrible image when you think about it, while the black pudding pie can eat through their armor, making them easier to hit with weapon attacks and spell attacks for the whole party. The Grick Alpha is a monster with a surprisingly high AC. Armor made from Grick chitin amounts to half plate, but there's no disadvantage for stealth checks, and you can add your dex modifier up to +3 instead of +2. It's also not made of metal, so it's theoretically immune to things like rust monsters dissolving them. Making this armor is a more involved process than our other salvage examples so far, requiring several days of work and quite a lot of gold investment. But the result, I think you'd agree, is worth it for improving the equipment of a ranger, a ranged fighter, or even a monster hunter. Monster Salvage can, of course, be used to craft epic magic items from truly mythical monsters. Your party may put effort and investment to craft these magic items themselves, or honestly, you could simply just drop them into your campaign and they kind of have a pre-made epic backstory for that particular artifact. Before your party can slay Godrak, the Blood Demon, you must craft a spearhead from a glittering unicorn horn. And speaking of which, a salvaged unicorn horn can be crafted into a spear of radiant wrath. This weapon is wielded by clerics or paladins, and the creation of one is testament to times of great need. The spear inflicts radiant damage on your foes while healing allies, and is particularly scorned by liches, vampires, and demons. A unicorn is not a particularly high CR monster for your party to go and slay at a time when they might need this weapon, so slaying one isn't particularly challenging, but it's whether your party can live with the consequences of slaying such a good creature, even for a noble cause. Small hosts of Celestials may even mobilize to punish characters that have killed a unicorn for its horn, especially if they are in possession of a corrupted Spear of Wrath. Destroying a lich's soul cage is not the only way to prevent their resurrection, and few speak of the long and profane ritual that can be used to bind a lich's intelligence into their mummified head. Anyone in possession of a lich head can question the intellect inside, plying the lich's intelligence and arcane knowledge for secrets. Indeed, an inspiring necromancer may use a lich head themselves to learn how the transformation can be done. A modicum of the lich's power can also be drawn upon to cast spells, whether it is one known by the mage wielding the head, or a spell that has been cast from the lich's mind itself. The blasphemy is that every soul slain with the necrotic energies of a lich head feeds the lich's soul cage. This helps sustain the lich when any righteous character knows they should be destroyed, right? Lich heads are not powerless against their wielders. Whether they feign obedience to manipulate or try to dominate the will of their wielder, there is always the possibility that a vengeful lich head could escape their eldritch cage. I hope that this has been useful to you for creating Monster Salvage for your fantasy RPG campaign. Greg Marks has written an excellent article about expanding the Monster Salvage rules on the Ghostfire blog, including guidance on what the gold and time investments should be on crafting different magic items, and I'll throw a link to that article right here for you to go check out. If you enjoyed this video, you can join our Dark Fantasy campaign by subscribing. We're back every single week with more Dark Fantasy tips and advice, just like in this video, which shows you how to introduce the formidable Arcanist Inquisition into your campaign, or this video, which showcases the 5e Monster Hunter class, the Masters of Monster Salvage.